Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Govea. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group, located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, we're talking about a bit of a backfire over there at the White House. We've been covering the Biden document saga for a long time. We'll probably continue to cover it for a long time. But we're learning more about what the White House wanted to do with this whole thing. Why didn't they tell us about the documents when they found out about them back on November 2nd? Looks like a bit of a cover-up, and Ted Cruz is calling it the worst week ever. Biden's had a lot of bad weeks. If you remember, we lost some very good Americans when they were trying to exit Afghanistan, and he's had some difficulties throughout his presidency. But this is pretty bad, and the Washington Post came out with this story today saying that the White House strategy has really been pretty bad on this thing. In addition to him just being in possession of the documents, which in and of itself might be criminal or problematic, the cover-up is almost worse than the crime. So we'll talk about that today. There are two other very interesting articles that have dropped. One from the Free Beacon, which is proving to us, here he is. Here he comes. Here's Leaf Blower Guy. Come on, buddy. Rev it up so they can hear it. Free Beacon says that Hunter Biden was actually living there in 2017, right around the same time that those docs showed up. We'll unpack that article. And there's some really good sort of forensic analysis on some of these photos because they are pulling out the data and they can sort of pinpoint exactly where the photos were. All of this came from his laptop, of course. We also have another article showing us that he actually lived there at Wilmington. And so people are speculating that maybe he did have access to this stuff. And if he did, who else had access to this stuff? Because he did hang around, pal around with some pretty interesting characters. So we'll talk about all of that. We also are going to hear from Donald Trump. We haven't heard from him recently, especially related onto this saga, but he's back. And he came out with a very fun statement today, talking about double standards. We'll listen to that. We're going to take a quick gander at some of the polls because it looks like maybe Trump's polls are improving. I think maybe people have been a little too quick to write him off. We've got a clip from one of our favorite, Alina Habba, who's in the House. She is going to tell us about her take on the Biden documents. Representative Perry said that the current committee is legally constituted. The Republicans now have an oversight committee, and so they're going to be going after the Democrats. And he got asked, well, what's the difference between your committee and their committee? And he said, ours is legitimate. Theirs is fake. We also have a special counsel update over from the New York Times, and Trump's special counsel is now having to deal with the Biden documents. So we'll take a look at that story from the New York Times as well. The White House continues to remain silent on all of this. Don't hear anything from Karine Jean-Pierre. She has been really essentially silent over the last several days, but the president was traveling all over the place. I think he's in California out now today. And so there was an Air Force gaggle, they call it. Gaggle's a right phrase. And Olivia Dalton, this person is the deputy press secretary. She got asked a question about this whole confidential document saga, and we'll see what she had to say. Secretary Blinken got asked about this on his way down the stairs, and we have this individual who's a journalist from NPR. She says, yeah, a lot of this White House stuff is very, very black holy, which was the phrase yesterday. Very problematic. You got to be careful where you use that phrase. But that's what they were saying the White House was acting like. All right. So we'll talk about that. CNN is trying to run cover for Joe Biden. They're sort of flip-flopping between exit him and support him. And the question is, does the Secret Service have a list of names? We had a lot of debate about these Wilmington logs and whether anybody knew who was coming and going. This was the big hypocrisy. They were hyperventilating about Donald Trump, said this is a resort. I mean, what kind of disgusting people are rummaging around down there? And then lo and behold, you turn around, Joe Biden has a lampshade covering Hunter Biden's bong in his garage right next to the confidential documents. You go, oh, derp, that didn't work out too well for us. But is the Secret Service now going to be giving us more information? Fox News says maybe. They might be ready to provide information about those Delaware visitors. So we'll see what they have to say. We've got a clip from Comer, who is discussing China and how much money they dumped into the Penn Biden Center. We've got a clip from Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that these are massive double standards and She's looking for some good assignments on various committees to go after the Democrats. And she's also calling for people like Ilhan Omar to be removed. And we'll hear from Ilhan as well. And then we'll wrap up with just a few clips from Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI. For some reason, he was speaking at the World Economic Forum, and we've got 4 different clips from him. And we just like to check in and see what he's up to when he's out there palling around with Klaus Schwab and some of those other weirdos. So we have a lot to get to, as you can see, my friends. And if you would like to be a part of the program, the best place to do that is by going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. This is our members-only community. We have a lot of fun. We do member-only streams regularly. And there's a great group of people chatting away over there. Big shout-outs to JC, Dana's in the house, Fibro Rita's in the house, which I think is a new name. So big welcomes to Fibro Rita. Thank you for jumping in the chat. I see John Allen. I see John McGarvey. I see C. Reed. What's up? What's up, John Allen? No, John. No, I would never ignore you. We have Bonnie's in the house. Says, any pictures of Hunter driving the vet? Hold your horses on that one, Bonnie. We're coming right up to that one. We also have 4 Patriots, which is a great place to get your survival food and your survival gear. Over at 4patriots.com, you can use code Robert to get 10% off your code, off your purchase. Also, check out our friends at Goldco. I do like gold. I happen to like it, all right? So sue me. You can check out more about that at robertlikesgold.com. Protect your retirement with gold and silver. And of course, our law firm. I know most of you are not from Arizona, but if you know anybody who is in Arizona and they get in trouble with the law, that's what we do. 480-787-0394. Online at rrlawaz.com. All right. And so we are going to go through, we'll hear back from our sponsors again. I know there's a whole hubbub about, ad reads and profit and revenue. Oh, gosh. Well, we'll get to those in a minute. All right. So we'll cue that one up. All right. Anyways, let's get right into the content of the program on the day. The worst week for Joe Biden. He's had a lot of bad weeks. It's hard to really pick which one is the worst. But Ted Cruz says this one deserves to be in the running. We've heard a lot about Joe Biden's confidential documents. Not really many facts out of the White House, but a lot about them. And the question is, where'd they come from? How'd they get there? Whoever saw them? Is this a criminal charge? What the heck is going on? We're learning a lot more about it. The Washington Post is now saying that their strategy at the White House, the cover-up, is worse than the crime. The inability of them to be honest and transparent about any of this stuff when they found it in November 2nd, all the way up until this moment, is worse than Joe Biden being in possession of the actual documents. So they have some serious pitfalls. We will unpack all of those, as well as take a look at this photo and some others. Hunter Biden. What kind of car is he sitting in there right there? What is that car? I don't know. We're going to have to unpack that. But let's start off by hearing from Ted Cruz. He's telling us that this is a pretty bad week for the president. Ted Cruz from Texas.
This past week has been the worst week for the Biden White House since the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, since the murder of 13 servicemen and women. The White House hasn't had as bad a week as they've had. They've had incompetence, they've had scandal, they've had corruption, they've had dishonesty, and they've had hypocrisy. And all of that has been on display in the past week. When we saw Merrick Garland stand up and appoint a special counsel to investigate Joe Biden, I joked on my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, that Merrick Garland...
Subscribe to his podcast. He really wants you to subscribe to it. Verdict with Ted Cruz.
Garland was like a hostage video. He was blinking out SOS because he was so unhappy, and he was forced to do it. He had no choice but appoint a special counsel, given the utter hypocrisy in going after Trump. And it was discovered that Biden had classified documents, not in one place, not in 2 places, not in 3 places, but 4 and 5. He had him stuck by his Corvette. He had him stuck in a room by the garage. He had him in the Penn Center. He had him in the residence. You got to wonder where Joe Biden didn't have classified documents. And all of his preening about irresponsibility, he's either being dishonest or incompetent. But what's clear is he's sending Karine Jean-Pierre out there to dissemble, to mislead, to say things that are factually false. And day after day, she stands up and says falsehoods from that podium. And I think it's only going to get worse.
It is. And we have covered basically every one of those over the last several press briefing days, ever since we learned about this. I have gone through, and you've joined us, every single moment that they've asked about the Biden docs. I've clipped every single bit, haven't skipped one of them. I've watched every single press briefing. Her statement hasn't changed hardly at all. She has, in my opinion, been openly dishonest about this. We talked about her knowing about the December 20th documents, presumably, because she had to learn about the whole bundle of problems on January 9th, the same day that CBS broke that story. Presumably, she got up to speed on everything before January 9th. Everything, right? The November 2nd documents, including the December 20th documents. She should have known about those when she communicated to the American people on the 11th. But she didn't tell us about those 1220 documents, only the 11-2 documents. And now she is freaked out because everybody's asking her, what was your involvement? When did you know about this? When did you decide to not tell us about all the things you knew? So now she says, I can't answer anything about it, honestly. If you want to know about what the Justice Department is doing, talk to the DOJ. If you want to know what the White House thinks about any of this stuff, don't ask me. I'm only the press secretary. It's only my job. Talk to the White House counsel instead, because I can't answer any questions. It's going to get worse. Okay, Trump has a serious advantage because he's not in office. They are in office. They don't get to just continue to hide indefinitely. Now, the Washington Post is communicating that this is evidently becoming a very serious problem. They posted this, January 18th. Inside the White House document strategy. Uh-oh. And its pitfalls. All right, so that means that there was a strategy. Okay, hopefully it's a good one. Let's see. Biden aides are said to have tried to defer to the DOJ, lie low, okay, which means cover it up. Lie low. Let's just lie low. What are you talking? Is the Washington Post? They're conjugating these phrases. If this was a Trump article, it would say cover up or lie and avoid Trump-like behavior. They got a political firestorm and then a special counsel written by Matt Visor and 4 other people. It takes 30 people to write these articles now. One of President Biden's personal attorneys, and we've been trying to unpack this for some time. We're going to see if we can get any new details from this article. Let's just take a quick recollection of what the timeline looks like and some of the questions that we are still trying to tease out on this. Remember that on November 2nd, on this date, we had questions about who showed up first. Was it Pat Moore or somebody else? Pat Moore is this person right here, just so we have names to faces. Pat Moore evidently was one of the first people who showed up at the Penn Biden Center. That's that same center that we're going to learn is very, very heavily funded by the Chinese. Somebody did a drive-by, a walkthrough on this building. There was nobody even there, right? It's just a big, in my opinion, gigantic money laundering fraud scheme. So who shows up there? Why do they show up? What was in the scope of their fee agreements? And were they alone? And who was their first call? And how did all of this work? Because we know that when Merrick Garland came out and gave us his little press briefing, he told us that he got it all on November 4th, which was a Friday. But they found the documents on November 2nd, which was a Wednesday. So what happened in that day there? On November 3rd? Don't know. We had a bunch of these questions. Who called the White House? Who at the White House got the call? When did everyone get involved? As soon as somebody at the White House got the call, who was on the phone next? Ron Klain, White House Chief of Staff? Karine? Anybody from any national intelligence agency, community, DOJ? Who's all involved, right? This is a confidential documents emergency. Who was at the National Archives when they got the call? And what was the timeline of the transition from the White House to the OIG? Let's see if we can get any facts from this article. One of the president's personal attorneys, they write, entered the 10-story office building so near the U.S. Capitol that its promoters billed it as the, quote, front seat to power, which is why it's perfect for the Chinese. On a Wednesday last November, they were there to begin what seemed like a mundane task, clearing out a rarely used office that Biden occupied after leaving the vice presidency. So a couple lawyers are just like, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm just clearing out some offices. Hopefully there's nothing in there. Whistling while they work. The attorney, Pat Moore, the gentleman we just saw, who has prior counsel for, many other campaigns, Democrats. Pat Moore went through a large closet, found nothing out of the ordinary. Somebody familiar with the matter said. Who is the source? Somebody familiar with the matter. And they're speaking on condition of anonymity. Then he tackled a smaller closet And in that closet, typical Joe Biden, he found it stuffed with folders, boxes, and other political memorabilia, including documents related to Beau Biden's funeral, drafts of political speeches, and boxes of personal books, the person said. But next, Moore made a very surprising discovery, a folder with a cover sheet saying it contained secret government documents. Moore immediately called another attorney, ? Who? And notified the White House counsel's office, which in turn contacted the National Archives, according to two people familiar with the matter. And again, no new information on this. Okay, we go back to the mind map as we have already discussed. We're still trying to unpack this. Who was the other lawyer who showed up? Bob Bauer, we might think represents one of these two guys. Bob Bauer, it might actually be representing Pat Moore. We don't know. We learned about that yesterday in the press briefing from, I think, the CBS story. Is Bob Bauer representing him or him? We don't know. So the Washington Post explains this like very quickly. Look at all this information they pack into this one sentence. We don't know. Called another attorney, notified the White House. They contacted the National Archives. Boom, boom, boom. The chain of custody followed the bouncing ball. We're missing a whole bounce. But if the way they found the classified documents was out of the ordinary, Biden's lawyers were determined to be sticklers for the rules once it happened, said people familiar with their work. Oh, we shouldn't have found it, but once we did find it, we realized we're going to do everything by the book. Those first decisions inside the complex at the Penn Biden Center launched a 71-day push by Biden's team, federal archivists, and the Justice Department to make sense of the startling discovery. All of that taking place, and we knew nothing about it until January 9th. And they didn't tell us. CBS did. It culminated in Attorney General Merrick Garland's decision, to the deep consternation of many in the White House, to appoint a special counsel. We covered this press briefing at length. This is Merrick Garland. He brought out John Lausch. John Lausch is the guy who was appointed back actually in November after the original documents were found. And then he gave, allegedly, John Lausch allegedly gave Merrick Garland a briefing, started his assessment November 14th after the documents were found on the 2nd. We fast forward, second batch is found on the 20th. Then we get a brief. Lausch then briefs Garland on January 5th. Now, I have a big question about whether, was this a planned meeting? Or did they plan this meeting after they heard that this story was about to break? I still don't know. Karine said that she found out about it around the time that the CBS story broke. She said, I wasn't involved in anything, if anybody believes that. I found out around the same time you guys were working on the story. That was the clip she said. So if it was right around the same time that they were working on the story, does that mean she found out on the day of publication? Probably not, right? Because they would have asked her for comment. What's the White House take on this? So did they send the story on the 6th after the meeting? Or did they send a request before the meeting and they thought, we better really sit down and discuss whether we need a special counsel or not. Otherwise, we're going to look like we are completely corrupt. So then, boom, they schedule, this rapid fire special counsel meeting. Then the story breaks, and then they can piece it back together and say, oh, no, we were already investigating. We were going to do that anyway. No. And it's all such a surprise that Joe Biden conveniently has a statement that's all just ready to read, right? He just walks out on January 10th. He's like, just got this thing right here. And I know exactly what it says, and it's all been handled because his lawyers are already on the case. So Lausch then gets involved. Interviews with people directly involved in the discovery. And the subsequent fallout provided new details on the effort to handle the crisis created at the intersection of politics, intelligence, and the law. Republicans and other critics say the White House was, at minimum, slow to seek the truth and level with the public. Biden's aides say that they were simply proceeding with caution in a very sensitive probe, and we were taking the lead from the federal investigators. In mid-November, they say that in a communication that has not yet been previously reported, in November, mid-November, so we don't know what date it is, we're going to add it to the mind map. A senior official in the Justice Department's National Security Division who wrote a letter to Bob Bauer, Biden's personal attorney, asking for his cooperation with the department's inquiry. The justice official asked specifically that Biden's legal team secure the materials from the Penn Biden Center and refrain from further reviewing them or other relevant documents that might be stored at different locations, according to the letter, the contents of which were shared with the Post. All right, so if we clip this out, we see that here they're saying in mid-November, we can go back to the mind map and add it mid-November. Now, we don't know exactly when, so presumably it's right around the same time that this Lausch is assigned. Okay, Garland assigns USAO Lausch, so we're probably thinking that around November, let's say like 20th-ish, we get a letter from the DOJ to Bob Bauer, Biden's lawyer. And Bob Bauer is actually a former White House special counsel, was formerly a White House special counsel to, I think it was Barack Obama when he was actually over there. So he sends a letter back over to Bob Bauer, and we've already actually put Bob Bauer in the first part of the mind map because we think it's this same guy who's working to represent one of these other attorneys. Bob Bauer is this fella here. And I had a picture of him in a prior show. But you're following along, and so it's all kind of convoluted. The point is, November 20th-ish, they say don't continue to look at the documents. Let's pick it back up. The justice official also requested that Bauer give the DOJ formal consent to review the materials, and that he provide a list of other locations with relevant materials to be stored as the department weighed the proper protocols for future document searches. Permission to review other locations. The letter, with its implication that the Justice Department would take the lead in the inquiry, paved the way for the Biden team's approach. So Biden's now interfacing with the DOJ. They adopted a strategy of caution and deference, making only limited moves in coordination with federal investigators to determine the number of documents involved, their significance, and how they were mishandled. They hope that that would earn the trust of the investigators, avoid comparisons with the former President Trump, who's under federal investigation of his own, and end the matter quickly. Right? Their thesis was they would cover this up, end the matter quickly. That's a cover-up. Instead, it yielded a political firestorm, and it repeated accusations of obfuscation, and instead of a speedy resolution, now they've got a special counsel probe. If they would have just come out and told us, right, about this at the very beginning, they could have said it's very different than Trump's case and we're just going to resolve it under the direction of the DOJ. It would have been a different story, but they kept this under wraps. Former Senator Doug Jones, a Democrat from Alabama, said that the Biden team was right to notify the authorities quickly, adding that it was critical to respond appropriately. Still, Democrat says, yeah, he could have been more transparent with the public. He says, I probably would have opted to do some things a little bit differently. You know, he's a one-time prosecutor, like not covering it up. When it came to the appropriate time to make a statement, give as much facts as you can without jeopardizing the investigation. Now, after the Biden White House alerted the National Archives, it did make initial moves to learn how the classified documents had reached the center and possibly elsewhere, according to two people familiar with the process. But by November 10th, a day after Biden held a celebratory news conference touting Democrats' strong midterm election results, the DOJ informed Biden's lawyers that it was launching its own inquiry and within weeks would be sitting down with Biden aides for interviews, according to two people familiar with the process. Weird how that happens. It's all pretty quiet up until the election. We have just a little bit of a delay. Documents are found. Call the White House. White House fiddles around for a day or two. They call the National Archives. DOJ gets involved. They say, "Oh man, it's a Friday though. Should we tell the American people about any of this stuff?" that we found some documents and maybe it could be something, probably nothing or anything like that? I mean, we could, but it's like 4:45 right now, though. Like, it's Friday, November 4th. We could probably just do it next week, right? Yeah, that's probably a good call. So they just wait. Oh, man, I forgot about the election. Oh, okay. Well, now we better get to it. So they come back to the office next week. They're still hungover. And on November 9th, they say, oh, gosh, we better look at that file all of a sudden. Wow, okay, great. Maybe we should appoint somebody. Then Garland fiddles around for another few days, and Garland assigns, finally, some prosecutor to look into it. Then they get a letter saying, okay, on November 20th now, okay, think about how far away that is from the date of the original find. 18 days, November 20th-ish, okay? Could be after that, could be sooner. We don't know exactly what the date is. Almost 3 weeks before they finally get a letter from the DOJ. Hey, it's probably a good idea that you stop rummaging around everything. And are there any other documents, and do we have your permission? Almost 3 weeks, give or take, before they finally said stop rummaging around. Trump had FBI agents on his property going through Melania's underwear. And they're just, we'll get around to it. November, mid-November. So finally, they're going to get to interviews. At that point, Biden's attorneys then stopped seeking information from his staffers. They wanted to avoid any impression they were tampering with witnesses. They had already gotten the job done, okay, at that point. Believe me, it's been 3 weeks. They cleaned everything up. Oh, no, we don't need to talk to you anymore. Instead, they switched abruptly to a highly cautious mode, deferring almost completely to federal investigators, so that now they don't have to answer any questions. Among other things, Biden top aides were keenly aware that Trump had spent months defiantly refusing to return the documents. They say the last thing Biden supporters would have wanted was a parallel probe, but that's what they got. Early on, there was a shared desire to keep quiet. Everybody wanted to cover this up. This is from the Washington Post, not Fox News. Early on, Biden's attorneys and the Justice Department investigators both thought they had a shared understanding about keeping the matter quiet. What? Let me read that one more time here. There was a shared desire to keep quiet. And just as a reminder, Joe Biden is the president. The Department of Justice is in the executive branch, which is under the purview of the presidency. That's what the presidency is. So there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. When a potential investigation from the DOJ into the presidency, which is your boss, and you both decide you're going to keep this quiet, this is the Washington Post printing this. This is called a cover-up, okay? You can just replace this. Anytime you see this phrase, to keep quiet equals cover-up. Early on, Biden's attorneys and the Justice Department investigators both thought they had a shared understanding about keeping the matter quiet. Oh my gosh. But they had very different reasons. Well, the White House was hoping for a speedy inquiry that would find no intentional mishandling of the documents and planning to disclose the matter only after the Justice Department issued its all clear. Federal investigators, for their part, typically try to avoid complicating any probe with a media feeding frenzy. These two sides are just the most rotten in the whole world. It's unbelievable. They're both playing patty cake with each other. And look whose name shows up in the article. As always, the person who actually runs the Justice Department, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. She declined at a news conference on Wednesday to say whether law enforcement officials suggested Biden representatives should keep quiet about the case. Did you tell them to shut their mouths, or was that their idea? Because if it's your idea, that's a big problem. If it's their idea, that's a big problem too. Who said it? But the approach would end up prompting accusations that the Biden team had purposely kept the public in the dark. They did. They did keep America in the dark. Biden's aides sought to follow the Justice Department's guidance, heeding its protocols for conducting searches and reporting additional discoveries, said the two people familiar with the probe. Some at the White House remain furious at Garland and other DOJ officials, saying the Attorney General named a special counsel to pursue Biden even after they did everything the department had asked. Wow. So there's a little bit of animosity brewing there in the Biden cabinet. Despite the consultation between the DOJ and Biden, 6 weeks elapsed before Biden's attorneys discovered additional documents at his Wilmington home. There was a lot to comb through. When Biden left the vice presidency, he received a temporary office space where he and his aides were supposed to separate personal papers from the official records that, under the Presidential Records Act, must go to the National Archives. After 6 months, the archives typically take custody of classified material. At the time, Biden was renting a 12,000 square foot house in McLean, Virginia, where he kept a private office. But in February 2018, the Penn Biden Center officially opened, providing another space for him to work. The center, created at the University of Pennsylvania, was a think tank academic hub. As attention focused on the documents path, Biden's longtime executive assistant, Kelly Chung, we have a new name, has confided to associates that she is distressed that she might have been inadvertently moving and storing classified material at the center, planting the seeds of the current uproar. Bill Taylor, Chung's lawyer, declined to comment. We have a new person here. Confided to associates she's distressed that she might have inadvertently been involved in moving or storing classified material. All right, so poor Kathy Chung's about to get taken out. She is the new fall person now involved in this. So good luck to Miss Kathy Chung. So we'll add her into the conversation and the mind map and watch closely to see what happens with her. Chung became Biden's executive assistant after the president's son, Hunter, alerted her to the vacant post. Chung had worked on Capitol Hill. Ted Kaufman, the president's longtime confidant and former chief of staff, recommended her for the job. They were also looking for items in the garage. 1967 Corvette. Wow. Biden had just returned to Washington from a long pre-Christmas weekend in Delaware when his personal attorneys began another search, 7 weeks and 110 miles away from the first. This time, the lawyers were looking in Biden's garage in Wilmington. It's where Biden stores his Corvette. The garage, in footage captured outside the campaign, had multiple cardboard boxes and a lampshade that I still suspect is covering Hunter Biden's bong, sitting off to the side. Biden, during this time, this is probably when they found the December 20th documents, right? Biden had been kept up to speed, and he had to sign off on searches of his personal property. Okay, that's nice. They asked him for permission to search his property. They didn't raid it with the FBI. Now, they should have, right? Because they found the first batch of documents in the Penn Biden Center, and that means that Joe Biden has a confidential document problem. They said that Trump had a confidential document problem, therefore that warranted FBI raiding. He's got another batch. It wasn't until mid-November that his attorneys got a letter. So I got to go back after the show and match these dates up again. He had dealt with classified materials. He was writing a book after leaving the presidency, saying maybe that's why they're there. When his lawyers searched the garage, they found what they called a small number of records with classified markings. Once they made the discovery, they alerted John Lausch, the guy we've talked about, the U.S. attorney overseeing the inquiry. They immediately stopped searching, according to a timeline that Bauer released on Saturday. This is the property, Wilmington, Delaware. Smaller home in front was built for his mom, I guess. I guess that's the smaller home. You know, probably has, 10, 13 bedrooms. All right. Veterans of cases involving these people familiar with the case. Kathy Chung, was interviewed by the DOJ on January 4th. While she was involved in the record, she had no connection to those sent to Biden's home in Wilmington. All right. So they can't stick her with that one. Public revelations reveal that there are more searches. Now, the drama was still unfolding out of the public eye with only a tight circle of White House advisors aware of it. Those advisors crafted a statement shortly after the documents were first discovered. In case news of finding leaked. These people covered this up so badly. While the drama was still unfolding out of the public eye, with only a tight circle of White House advisors aware of it, those advisors crafted a statement shortly after the documents were first discovered in November. In case news of that finding leaked, they wrote a cover-up statement while they were covering it up in case it got uncovered. But that statement would go unused. Biden's top aides were determined that the legal process would override any political moves or public messaging, not the other way around. They did not want to be seen as trying to shape the investigation's outcome. They say, this is a rule of law administration. We were just trying to cover it up. But this was not a run-of-the-mill legal process. It was handling a sensitive information. It was by the president, highly polarized political backdrop. They just raided a former president's house over this. CBS News first broke the story of the matter, contacting the White House on January 6th. Oh, man, that's a date that we want right there. That's a beautiful one. All right. Now, that answers one of my questions about whether or not this was that January 5th meeting between Garland and Lausch was pre-planned or not. So what they're saying here on this mind map, CBS broke the story on January 9th. U.S. attorney reviewing documents says that there were findings at one of Biden's houses. There was a meeting that took place on January 6th. We just learned that on January 5th, there was a meeting. We just learned on January 6th, CBS contacted KJP, or basically the White House, on that day. And so that's when she learned about it, on January 6th, to ask about the documents. So she actually said that she found out around the same time. So it could have been really, roughly around that time. We still don't know specifically when Karine Jean-Pierre found out about any of this, but we know that CBS contacted the White House at least on the 6th. So now, do you believe that they just happened to meet on the 5th and decided they needed a special counsel, and then the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, learned about all of this the next day? What a very interesting coincidence. And then CBS broke the story, and then Karine's like, wow, this is all news to me. Amazing. Very, very convenient. But since the investigation was ongoing, they decided not to offer any more details. They did confirm the scoop on the 6th, but no more details. A few days later, just after 5 p.m. on January 9th, CBS News aired its report. Biden was in Mexico. Motorcade was filled with his top advisors, some of whom worked with him at the Penn Biden Center. By happenstance, Garland, who days earlier had been advised to name special counsel on the 5th, was on a trip to Mexico and in the president's motorcade. Oh, they're riding around in Mexico together. But oh my gosh. Do you remember, folks? Do you remember when Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton met with Attorney General Loretta Lynch, or whatever that saga was? They landed in an airport and they just happened to bump into each other. Most of those who were traveling with Biden were blindsided by the story. The next day, Biden told reporters that he was surprised about the documents that he found, making no mention of those at his Wilmington house. That reflected a decision by Biden's advisors to only react to what was publicly known, not to elaborate or provide additional information for fear of appearing to infringe on the DOJ's work. Even some of Biden's top officials had been kept in the dark. This is what she said. KJP said, pressed repeatedly about the documents, struggled to provide clear-cut answers. There's no way for me to talk about the documents if he has said that he doesn't know what's in them. We're just going to allow the process to continue. She said no more assurances. She repeated herself like a broken record for the last 3 days. On January 11th, Biden's personal attorneys went back to Wilmington to continue their search. And that was on the 11th. Personal lawyer went back down. We don't know who that lawyer was. Extra batch was found on the 11th. We followed that one. As they sifted through the documents in a room next to Biden's garage, They found a page with classified markings. Leaving it there, they moved on to other parts of the house, according to Bauer's timeline. So again, I don't know if they have clearance to do that, right? Are they allowed to go search? Like, if you don't have security clearances to handle top secret classified documents, are you allowed to go search for top secret classified documents? That doesn't make all that much sense to me. And this was on January 11th. And so presumably that's after the time that they got the letter from Lausch that we just covered. We just added this to the mind map where they said there was a letter from the DOJ. This is from the same article. Mid-November-ish, the DOJ sent a letter to Bob Bauer. In mid-November, in a communication that's not previously been seen, a senior official at the DOJ wrote a letter to Bob Bauer, Biden's personal lawyer, the same guy we're going to talk about next, asking for his cooperation. Asked him, secure the materials from Penn, refrain from viewing them or other relevant documents that might be stored at different locations. The DOJ asked them, stop looking. That's according to the Washington Post. It's right here. But when you go back here, on January 11th, Biden's personal lawyers went back to Wilmington to continue their search. Did they not get the letter that came from the DOJ? Why? And actually, it was according to Bauer, like Bauer wrote the timeline. So in his timeline, does he say we got a letter mid-November from the DOJ that said stop looking at stuff and I went and looked anyways? What are they doing? The Biden attorneys traveled to the president's vacation home in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. No classified records were found there because it had already been shredded, according to Bauer's timeline. So the special counsel then gets appointed. In the morning, Biden's lawyers informed justice investigators of the additional document in Wilmington. The White House also released a statement acknowledging they found the second batch. About 20 minutes after that statement, Biden held an avowed touting improved economic numbers. As soon as he finished, he was asked about additional classified information. He said, by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage, okay? I think he was kind of joking about it. Not like they're sitting out there in the street. And he said, I'm going to get a chance to speak about this, God willing, soon. Then Garland came out, appointed as special counsel. They're firing different comparisons off. They're very angry. They say this was an honest mistake. Some are very critical of his lawyers. Several Biden aides now regret that initial strategy, obviously, recognizing it made them appear less than transparent. Biden's team is now trying to shift to a more proactive approach. They clearly have lines that they're not going to cross over, but these are cascading revelations. Yeah. The Penn Biden Center office that Moore had first gone to empty has remained uncleared. So that office is still full over there. And wow. So as you can see, there's a pretty interesting revelation in this article. Sounds like the DOJ said stop looking. And they kept looking. Flew to Rehoboth, flew to Wilmington, and actually found more documents. So why are they disregarding direct requests from the DOJ? That's my question. They said that they're cooperating. Karine Jean-Pierre said, we're cooperating with everything. They sent a letter to the White House that says, don't go look for more documents. They were still looking for documents as of a week ago. So where is that cooperation? Unbelievable. All right. That's the timeline. Now, spent a lot longer on that than I thought. There's a lot of juiciness in that article. But let's see what else they have in store for us, because there's a whole lot more to get to today. And there are additional articles saying what a catastrophe this is. First one comes over from Free Beacon. They're saying in Wilmington, Hunter Biden actually lived there. And here are the photos. Over from the Washington Free Beacon, written by Andrew Kerr, January 18, 2023. Look at this photo. Who is that? Who is that person? And who are those two, definitely adult individuals who are in the car next to him? And he has an American flag on his hat. Just very offensive to America. Here's what they write about these photos. We're going to take a look at them. Photos, writes Andrew, from Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop that we've talked a lot about here, show that the scandal-plagued first son had access to Joe Biden's daddy Corvette that he kept in the garage next to those confidential documents under the lampshade. But a review of Hunter Biden's laptop that was conducted by the Washington Free Beacon found 4 2017 photographs of Hunter Biden. White collared shirt, camouflage baseball cap, behind the wheel of a 1967 Corvette Stingray. Now, what you can do when you extract these photos is pull out GPS metadata from the files. When they did that, they recognized that these photos were taken within just 1 minute of each other, and it happened at 6:49 p.m. July 30th, just outside the Wilmington residence. The photos show Hunter Biden posing in the vehicle beside 2 young girls. One appears to be his 12-year-old niece, Natalie. The other could not be identified. And so you see the photo, faces are blurred out, of course. But when you actually look in the photo, you can extract, I think it's called EXIF data, the EXIF data. And you can see iPhone 7 Plus. The date is here, date and time, 2017. The aperture value, brightness value, all the details. And one of the details is location. And so they were able to find the location, and you see Hunter Biden riding in daddy's Corvette with evidently his niece. And so as the story continues, it says, while it's unclear exactly when Joe Biden transferred those classified records, sources close to the president have suggested that that the transfer occurred when he was shutting down his office in 2017. Photos are the most concrete evidence to date that Hunter Biden had access to areas of Joe Biden's home where the classified records were stored. If he's got access to the Corvette, he's got access to the garage. It's unclear who else had access to the president's car or the garage in which it was stored. The White House said this week that it doesn't keep visitor logs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here is another photo. You can see somebody actually put the address into a map and they pinned it right there in Joe Biden's home. Beautiful property, right on the water. 2 houses, a whole separate house for mom. The White House and Hunter Biden didn't respond to any requests for comments. Now, if Hunter did have access to the classified documents, other national security concerns might pop up. Constantantos, Gus, a former Secret Service agent and a certified cyber forensics expert who analyzed the Hunter Biden laptop, says, yeah, I can attest to the authenticity of these documents. He was there. At the time he was there, he was meeting with all sorts of different business people. We talked all about the CEFC and Hunter Biden's affairs. Hunter Biden was also issued a Delaware driver's license in May, listed his father's home as his address. He directed his Wells Fargo financial advisor to change his banking address to his residence, and he also added the address to his PayPal account in January 2019. And a notarized deed identifies Hunter Biden as, quote, a divorced man residing at his father's Wilmington property. So he was inside. He was getting the Corvette. He was taking his nieces around for joyrides, doing whatever they were doing there in that Biden family. Don't even want to know. All right, so that's another story of what was going on there with that Corvette. But it wasn't just that, and he wasn't just roaming around there. There's more. Breitbart says that he was also bagging millions of dollars while he was living there, all of it linked to Chinese intelligence. Breitbart.com has this exclusive. And they write, very fun, they say, while addicted to drugs and cavorting with prostitutes, Hunter Biden lived in the house where they stored the documents. There was another document found that said that he paid $49,910 a month for the property, and we talked about that previously on the show. This was the document. You saw it said here, current residence, and the monthly rent is $49,910 a month. Woo, nice rent. Hunter also listed that address on his license, claimed to pay rent there from March 2017 to Feb 2018 at the Wilmington address. They say, though, he was not paying his father $50,000 a month. That was office space in another location. But the period that he did live there, the Wilmington house, it overlaps with the time when Biden and Biden family members were taking tons of money from the CCP. Here's a photograph of these two little something or others. Yeah. Hunter claimed on various documents that he lived at the Wilmington house between 2017 and 2019. They say this is problematic because he had many Chinese business deals back during that time. Beginning in late 2015, while Daddy was still vice president, Hunter began making plans with people like Patrick Ho, Ye Jingming, Gong Weng Dao, all of these people we talked about. He got diamonds like this one, something like $80,000. 3.16 carat diamond was a gift to him from somebody. All sorts of shady deals. And we've covered this. If you missed the interview with Garrett Ziegler from Marco Polo USA that we did on this channel, I highly recommend it because he has done his due diligence on this case. And you can check out more there at marcopolousa.org to learn more about this scheme. Chairman Hunter Biden, monochrome name, 50%, Hudson West. These are geniuses here. Look at this org chart. I'm pretty bad at math, but if you have two people, you both get half the pizza. Throughout the summer of 2017, the CEFC arrangements were being hashed out. Hunter agreed to represent all these people. They executed an agreement. Hunter was ultimately paid $1 million through Owasco, which is that organization that they use their org chart for. Very interestingly, though, the partner, Ho, was arrested, convicted December, international bribery and money laundering charges. Oh, upon incarceration, guess who Ho called first? Brother Biden, James. He was looking for Hunter, and James gave him Hunter's contact information. He's like, oh, crap, don't call me. You're looking for Hunter? You're in jail? Oh, he's familiar with all that stuff. Call him. Hunter had never been a serious attorney, right? He just sort of went to law school. I think he graduated as a lawyer. So his receiving $1 million to represent Ho is notable, given that Hunter apparently was living in a house with classified documents at the time. Wait a minute. To represent him, he got paid $1 million to represent him on a criminal case? Oh my gosh, what a scam. Oh my gosh. That's bribe money, man. The same month that Hunter executed the representation agreement for the Patrick Ho matter, 3 separate credit cards were linked to Hunter, James, and Sarah. Credit cards allowed the Bidens to go on extravagant shopping sprees. They racked up $100,000 in purchases. September 2017, Hunter Biden leased the office at the House of Sweden for an entity. A September 2017 email shows Hunter requesting keys to the building for Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Jim Biden, and Chairman Ye. Remember that? We covered that one. It's great to move into your building. I need them for my family and China. All right, you can read the rest of the story here over at Breitbart, but they've got more on the exclusive, and the story just continues to unfold. There's a lot there. But we'll continue on. Of course, Biden is not taking any questions about any of this, and you can see as he's walking away, we're going to wait to hear from him. Not sure if that's ever going to happen. This is what it looked like when he was walking to the helicopter to leave the White House. All right, so we'll see what the White House has to say, but there are more reactions from other people responding to the Biden document saga, and one of those individuals is Donald Trump. Trump responds to the Biden confidential document saga. He knows something about this. He had his home raided by the FBI, and now he's responding. He's saying, this is not really fair. We have equal standards in this country, and what's happening to me is very different than what's happening to Joe Biden. So we'll listen to Trump's statement. We'll also listen to what his attorney, Alina Habba, had to say about all of this. Before we turn our attention over to Representative Perry, check in with the special counsel and look at some of the polls from Donald Trump. But first, let's hear from the man himself. We've been following along the special master, the special prosecutor, all of the different components of the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid for many, many months now. And now Trump speaks.
Of justice in our country, one for people like you and me. And
let's start that over again.
We have two standards of justice in our country, one for people like you and me, and one for the corrupt political class, of which there are many.
True.
At the very same moment when my ultra-secure Mar-a-Lago home was raided by the FBI, Joe Biden was harboring classified documents in his China-funded Penn Center and his unsecured garage. Right on the floor, piles of paper. The floor was probably very wet and damp, as many garages are.
No photos of that,
while I'm being persecuted by Trump-hating special counsel, I call them special prosecutors, but this one in particular is a prosecutor and a Trump-deranged person. They prosecute all sorts of things. He prosecuted war crimes and war criminals. Joe Biden, in the meantime, is being given white glove treatment by a establishment hack who tried to cover up the Russia hoax. He actually tried to cover it up. It's a travesty. Biden lied to the American people and weaponized the Justice Department, or as I call it, the Injustice Department. To go after me for the very crime he actually committed. And he wasn't president, so he didn't have the right to declassify, as I did. The difference is that while I did everything right, I did nothing wrong. Biden did everything wrong. The boxers hoax should be dropped immediately against President Trump. When I return to the White House, we will end the era of partisan witch hunts, restore equal justice under the law, and get back to government that delivers for the American people. And I mean securing our borders, creating millions and millions of jobs just like before, growing wages, stopping violent crime, and making our country great again. That's what we want to do, make America great again. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Appreciate that message. All true. All true. Good statement from Trump. And I think he's right. There are two systems of justice, two tiers. He had his house raided. Joe Biden didn't have his house raided. And we're taking a look at the differences between the two special prosecutors as well. Robert Hur has been appointed to go investigate Joe Biden. He's one of Trump holdovers that the Biden administration kept in place before they let all of the other U.S. attorneys go. So why is that? We know that there was some involvement of Robert Hur in the Trump investigations. And then for Donald Trump, they bring in this other special prosecutor called Jack Smith, this fella down here, who we're going to learn more about, and we're going to get an update on what he's working on. But he is a prosecutor from the International Criminal Court, goes after war criminals. So they bring him over to go after Trump. They bring in a U.S. attorney holdover that presumably Joe Biden likes. That's why he held him over to go investigate him. Very interesting differences there. But also curious from Donald Trump. Now, a question that we have is, what about Trump's lawyers? And we have a clip from one here. Her name is Alina Habba. And it's been some time since we've had a clip of Alina Habba. Too long, I'd like to say. And of course, she's Donald Trump's attorney. We hear from her all the time. Why don't we hear from Joe Biden's attorneys? When Trump got his house raided, we had 1 million clips of Alina Habba all over the TV. We played many of them here on this channel because we like to play those clips. She's very insightful. All right, I don't know what to say. And now she's back. But where were Joe Biden's lawyers? Nowhere to be found.
Meanwhile, I'm an attorney for President Trump, and I'm definitely not reading a script. I don't go on TV and say the same thing over and over and say that there is a system in the Department of Justice and we are following that system and we are cooperating. If I said that, what would they do to Donald Trump? We have no problem answering questions because we have nothing to hide. This is a completely ridiculous press secretary, frankly, that is just standing there and repeating the same sentence for the last 2 weeks because she has lied to the American people. She has hidden things, and she is just frankly incompetent and unable to respond. You need to respond. That's your job. So she needs to respond, most importantly, as to why we were told when the press leaked it, not when the Biden transparent administration told us first. That's not how this went down. So that's, again, a misstatement.
And obviously, too, President Biden's attorneys are not allowing him to talk about this. He's said in the past, I'll talk about this when I can, again, hinting that someone's controlling when and where he's able to speak.
They don't want him to talk. He can't talk.
To give some transparency to the American public, flying on his way out to California, as we saw President Trump do so many times, stopping at the rope line and take questions from reporters when I'm sure many people wished so.
I'm sure, but when you have nothing to hide, you respond, right? That's how it's just typical psychology. If you're being a puppet and you are told to do this and do that, and you've got, people in costumes pushing you out of the way because we're not sure you're going to make it back to the door like Biden, well, that's what happens. We've got a person who's a figurehead but isn't really doing very much in the White House, and it's quite unfortunate.
That's true. That is true. Alina Habba. And, did you see her kind of mocking Karine Jean-Pierre here? I was in stitches. Watch
Meanwhile,
this.
I'm an attorney for President Trump, and I'm definitely not reading a script. I don't go on TV and say the same thing over and over and say that there is a system in the Department of Justice and we are following that system and we are cooperating. If I said that, what would they do to Donald Trump? We have no problem answering questions because
Alina Habba. This is Department of Justice. If this is to defer to the White House Counsel. All right. Love it. Okay. Good for her. Outstanding. Just mocking them into oblivion. That's what needs to happen. That's very effective stuff. Now, while we're talking about Donald Trump, let's talk about our friends over at 4 Patriots, because I'm sure all of this news is making you hungry and you don't want to have food insecurity in your life. And so go over to 4patriots.com, because as you know, there is food shortages that could be coming here, even in the United States. And we don't want that to happen. And so as soon as I finish scrolling, I'll tell you the rest of what this is about. But a food shortage could be coming even in the United States. Experts have written about this as recently as July last year. We've got drought, inflation, new policies, FBI raids, World Economic Forum, all sorts of stuff, pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important now than ever, and why you should go to 4patriots.com to get your survival food kits. We're not talking about ordinary survival food. This stuff is good for 25 years. Hand-packed in family-owned facilities right here in the United States, giving jobs to over 200 Americans. They're sturdy, they're water-resistant, they're compact, and they stack easily. Many different delicious breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. All you've got to do, add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to this link on your screen at 4patriots.com and use code Robert to save 10% on anything in the store on your first purchase, including a 3-month survival kit. You'll get a guarantee on your order for an entire year after, plus free shipping on anything that's $97 or more. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to our charities that don't support our veterans and their families. And you can go to 4patriots.com today, use code Robert to save 10% off anything in the store and start building your stockpile today. And it's delicious. And look how happy and fun these images are. So go to 4patriots.com and support our sponsors. Now, the question, of course, is always, should we have another Alina clip? Do we want more Alina? The answer, of course, is yes. Here is another clip from Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, explaining the double standard between her representing Trump and Biden and his lawyers.
As this case unfolds and more documents have come to light, the way in which the public is learning about them is so much different than what we saw with former President Donald Trump.
Absolutely. There's no bells and whistles. Is anybody really surprised? And the fact that they knew about it November 2nd before a midterm election, failed to bring it up, and then they only brought it up when they got caught effectively by the press. That is, to me, the most concerning thing. They're supposed to be transparent. That's the Biden way, right? I don't see much transparency coming out of this administration.
When you look at, you compare that putting things and who has that power.
That's right.
The President of the United States has power to declassify. The Vice President does not. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, sure. I think that's the key to all of this. It is far more egregious that Biden had documents from when he was vice president. Yes, he's president now, but these are Obama administration documents. He has had them for a very long time, and he did not have the power, as you indicated, to declassify documents. That only rests with a sitting president.
All right, that's Alina Habba, and she's got some very insightful things to say. Very smart woman. We'd love to have her as a guest on the show. All right, so shout out to Alina and to the defense team representing Donald Trump, there's been this big question that's popped up, from a lot of Republicans. They're getting asked, gosh, why are you so hard on Joe Biden? I mean, you were not very hard on Donald Trump. What's going on here? Representative Perry got asked this question by Greta Van Susteren. She's over on Newsmax, which I didn't know. But she asked Mr. Perry, can you reconcile this for us, please? Because it feels like, to you, this Joe Biden document thing is a gigantic catastrophe. However, you weren't so concerned about Donald Trump. So what gives?
How do you reconcile? You wouldn't testify before a January 6th committee, and you're going to want to call people before your oversight committee. So how do you reconcile that? I mean, when you want to compel them.
Well, I reconcile it very easily. One is properly comprised, one
True.
is properly made, and the other one was not. The so-called January 6th committee didn't even comport with the House's own rules. And so it was not a legitimate committee and it had no authority to subpoena anybody. The fact that people went is of their own volition. But let's be clear, that committee so-called had no jurisdiction and was not a valid committee. So it's easy to reconcile this for me.
I agree with that. H.R. 503, that was what authorized the January 6th Select Committee, was not legally followed. It said that there should be 13 members on the committee, 5 of whom were Republicans. That didn't happen. Only 2. And they were Liz Cheney and crying Adam Kinzinger. Now, other people like Steve Bannon, they were not immune like Rep. Perry was. So they prosecuted those people, but they didn't prosecute Rep. Perry. This new body is legally constituted, and they're not happy about that. So while all this is going on, the prosecution against Donald Trump continues. We're going to learn more about that in a quick second. But first, take a look at these polls. It looks like Trump is kind of rebounding a bit. There were some interesting developments from some recent polls. Favorability polls came out. Donald Trump was working his way back up. So his favorability is now at 45%, unfavorable is at 48%. This is a YouGov poll that just came out. And Breitbart and others are saying this is trending back up. Okay, this used to be like in the 30s, this favorability number. And since December, it's now back up to 45%, right? Which is like kind of where he's normally at, right? Back up to sort of even standards. So a lot of people have been saying, oh, that dinner with Ye, oh, that dinner with Fuentes or whatever. All of these were going to be the end of him, and he is done, and his launch was all deflated and so on. And I have been saying for a long time that everybody in the conservative media who just threw him overboard did so imprudently. And I think they wrote him off a lot, way too quickly. And in other words, the rumors of his death, I think, are greatly exaggerated. Here you can also see now the polls, the matchups for presidency in a trial heat against Biden versus Trump still don't look good for him. Biden is up 42% to 36%, according to YouGov. And you get a DeSantis, and it's like he wins this one. 37 to 36, DeSantis pulls out over Joe Biden, according to this poll. This one still is a 26% unsure versus the Trump, where the unsure are, a much smaller percentage of the numbers. So there's still a big group of people that would break either way. There were some other interesting numbers from that poll that said that the favorability of the Democratic Party is just about even with Trump. Favorability is at 46% there to unfavorable at 46%, so about even. And Trump is right there, 45% favorable to unfavorable from the same sample. So again, a lot of people like to say he's dead and gone and this is all going to be the end of him. I've always been very doubtful of that. And I think it's been unwise for people to be so gung-ho about ejecting him from the political arena. But he is still facing a criminal prosecution. The New York Times has a bit of an update for us. Says the special counsel investigating Trump faces headwinds that few others have. This fella, his name is Jack Smith. He is the individual who is prosecuting Trump. Now he faces new challenges. He's got a Republican House and a Biden document problem. New York Times writes, Jack Smith, the special counsel appointed to investigate Trump, was already working 12-hour days before moving from The Hague at the criminal court back to Washington. The actions that Mr. Smith has taken since he began in November, which is the same time about when they found those documents over at the Biden place, suggest a prosecutor on the move to resolve concurrent investigations into Trump and his retention of documents and his actions during the J6 attack as a candidate. He has asked prosecutors to stress test potential charges related to Trump's documents. He's called back key witnesses to scrutinize their accounts. And he's presented information to grand juries. He's also pushed investigators to issue dozens of subpoenas related to efforts to overturn the prior election. And he's interviewed players in Mr. Trump's orbit to try to understand his mindset as to when and why he held onto government records. So is Robert Hur going to do all that? But even as Mr. Smith, known to his colleagues as a brisk and hard-charging prosecutor, pushes towards his goal of moving expeditiously, he faces serious headwinds. Challenges are unique to investigating Mr. Trump at a time when the Republicans created their own oversight committee. His job only became more challenging after Biden stole documents, which could force Merrick Garland into appointing a second special counsel, which already did. Garland knew that the president's lawyers had found the classified documents on November 2nd. John Lausch was involved. This account of Mr. Smith's early days is based on interviews. Some investigators on Mr. Smith's team prosecuting Trump believe that any initial charging decisions expected as early as this summer coming up will involve the investigation into whether Mr. Trump illegally kept classified materials and obstructed efforts, which is really what I think this is going to come down to, obstruction. They're going to try to separate it on that. Biden, they're already crafting this narrative. No obstruction, cooperation, no obstruction, no cooperation. And we did everything by the law. We did the right thing. We did the right thing. They're just setting this up. Trump was obstructing. They were not. Trump should be prosecuted. Biden should not. You can almost envision James Comey walking back out again and saying, well, no, it's extremely careless what they did, but not grossly negligent. Same type of thing we saw with Hillary. That case involves a more discrete set of facts than the sprawling examination into Trump's actions leading up to J6. Any charges would be legally and politically fraught, as would any decision to not charge the president. While the possible criminal violations being scrutinized are relatively straightforward, it's less clear what it might mean. Under Mr. Smith, prosecutors have subpoenaed a range of people seeking documents that relate to vendors, lawyers, political officials, covering the period from October 2020 to September 2022. All right, so just consider the scope of this. The scope of Trump's special prosecutor is way bigger than what they are doing with Robert Hur. They want to know about all the false claims and so on. Ken Starr, they give us some history on that one too. Now they write, Lisa Monaco is also here. Mr. Garland met with Mr. Smith in Washington, said he'd be the right choice, and he's going to be facing an uphill battle. So his early interactions with investigators would be familiar, saying he's very, very aggressive. They say, we believe he has a viable case. We'll see if they file. So it's going to be fun. Now, again, even if they have the possibility of winning a potential criminal prosecution against Trump, I don't know that it's a good decision, because it's going to look like a big double standard if they don't also prosecute Biden. Unless they can try to thread that needle by just calling it obstruction. We'll see. Now, we also have the White House, and they're staying pretty silent on most of this. The Biden White House doesn't want to answer any questions about the confidential document dilemma. They are even flying Joe Biden out of town so they don't have to have any more press briefings from Karine Jean-Pierre. We've covered many of hers. She has had a difficult time over these past 3 days. And when the president's traveling, they don't really need to even go out there and talk to the press because they're traveling. Instead, what they do these Air Force gaggles where they don't actually answer anything and there's no video. So you just get to hear them bumble around on a very loud airplane. But what is going on at the White House? What is the deal with these confidential documents? Is Biden ever going to answer any questions? Yesterday, we heard that Karine Jean-Pierre was basically done with the press. She said, any questions for the DOJ, go to them. Any questions for me? I don't want them. Take them to the White House counsel. But there was a question that came in from the press about allies and partners. The media had just gotten done being told how catastrophic Donald Trump's possession of top secret documents was, and how this could be so detrimental to our world allies, our leaders across the globe. And so Karine got asked that same question. Now that Biden's documents that are top secret and that might involve national security affairs of foreign nations Are you going to reassure them?
Take another stab at it, but we don't know what's in these documents, but can the U.S. and is the U.S. working to reassure allies and partners that you can still participate in intelligence gathering and still be trusted with secrets? Are those conversations that the president is having right now, or that top of administration officials are having, for example, Jake Sullivan in Israel? I'm going to say this. The president takes classified information seriously. You heard that directly from him. To classified documents seriously. You heard that directly from him last week. And I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to open this up for discussion. We have answered many questions as it is related to the documents. Any specifics that's related to this review, this legal process, I would refer to the Department of Justice.
All right, so no answers, no question. What about allies? No answers from Karine. So we ask our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, what about our allies? What about the national security implications of these documents? You people were screaming about it when Trump allegedly did this. What about now?
Answers on specific questions from the White House press secretary, but that's not the only place that there are a lack of answers on this issue of the Biden documents. Here's the Secretary of State.
Secretary Blinken, do you have an issue with how the president handled classified documents?
Good to see you.
Excuse me. Do you think it's a national security threat that multiple classified documents were found in President Biden's Wilmington house?
No. Now watch his face. He knows what's coming. You can see he's got a smile. He just knows he got ambushed. He's like, oh, she got me. As soon as he makes eye contact right here, here's Antony Blinken is the Secretary of State. And he looks over at this Fox reporter, and she was pissed yesterday. She said that the White House had turned into a black hole. She was talking about, certain individuals over there, and it got a little bit spicy on, gotta be careful here. And so she is feisty, she's wants answers, man. She's angry. And as soon as he makes eye contact with her, he starts that smirk. Watch the smirk. He goes, uh-oh, busted. Oh, man. And then you see it right there. Look at that smirk right there. You can see it. Oh, he knows he's busted. He's going to get a question. He's smirking. He's not going to answer. And then he says, good to see you. All right, let's listen again.
Secretary Blinken, do you have an issue with how the president handled classified documents?
Good to see you.
Excuse me. Do you think it's a national security threat that multiple...
And then he's on his phone. Look at this guy. What are you checking Twitter here? Look at this. What is this? What are you on there?
Threat.
Probably. Oh, there it is. What is that? Is that a message to Joe Biden? Is that a confidential document? Oh, gosh.
That multiple classified documents were found in President Biden's Wilmington house.
All right. So that's what we got out of the White House. Now, they're traveling. Joe Biden's on an airplane. So they are doing the gaggles now. Karine Jean-Pierre, she is still, getting a massage or something from all of the abuse she's taken from the press over the last few days. And so they sent out this person. Her name is Olivia Dalton. And she gets asked on Air Force One about these documents because the media is not done with this. They might be done with it, but the media isn't.
Does the White House have any problem with the Penn Biden Center sharing information such as visitor logs with the House Oversight Committee?
I appreciate the question, and I think we realize you all have many questions on this. We believe and we continue to say that they are most appropriately handled by the White House Counsel's office, so I'd have to refer you to them on this.
Referrals again.
Pledge to cooperate with the House Oversight Committee for any requests that they may make. That's an easy one.
Again, I have to refer you to White House Counsel's office on this.
You can't even give a simple pledge that, of course, we're going to cooperate with an Oversight Committee in Congress.
White House Counsel's office also engages with Oversight, and I would refer you to my colleagues in Counsel's office on that.
A request from the House Oversight Committee?
Again, I just need to refer you to my colleague to handle.
Zero answers. So the House Oversight Committee is now in charge of this. They're going to be asking you questions. Are you going to cooperate with Congress? Yes or no? Talk to the White House counsel. You can't even tell us. Nope, can't tell you.
You mentioned that tomorrow is 2 years since the president took office. It's also 6 years since he left office as vice president. Can you guarantee that the president no longer has any classified or official records in his possession anymore from his time as vice president?
Again, I need to refer you to White House Counsel's office on any questions on this.
again, I need to refer you. So they can't even, the White House can't even say that we have no more additional documents, right? They can't even answer that because they're not being transparent at all. Now, a lot of people in the media have issues with this, including this woman. She's over from NPR. And as we've been following Karine Jean-Pierre around the press briefing room, we've seen her, like a broken record, say the same thing over and over and over and over again. But we often don't know what happens outside of those press briefing rooms. Remember, Karine told us that there was a separate call with White House counsel that was a big whopper of 45 minutes. And the media wasn't very happy about that. They said, okay, that's great. He talked about the economy and the border. But how about answers to our questions? This woman is on CNN, and she is a reporter over at NPR, and she says, yeah, we're not getting any access at all.
I mean, I think that there's a frustration, I can say, generally speaking, I hope I'm not overgeneralizing, amongst many reporters, because there has been, I think, a sense that that the White House has not been as forthcoming as journalists would like with the information and the timeline. I mean, the first batch of documents were discovered shortly after the midterms. That was not disclosed until CBS broke the story.
Yeah. So NPR is frustrated. CBS is frustrated. Everybody's frustrated. Even CNN is running some interesting stories about this, except this one. You know, CNN is sort of, the pendulum is swinging both ways. We learned earlier in this week that CNN had a montage, sort of a segment where they were kind of ripping on Joe Biden and his affairs with James and Hunter. And we thought, wow, welcome to the party, pal. We've been talking about this for years now. And they're just running stories. And it's sort of like they're supporting the removal of Biden kind of a thing. We're going, this is weird. Where did this all happen? Like a light switch went on. But then you turn over to news anchors like this. She's on CNN, and she identifies differently. She thinks this is all much ado about nothing. Okay, these are the types of clips that a lot of conservatives got skewered for. Let's listen.
All right, this morning we got some new CNN reporting about how just common it could be for classified documents to be outside of the protected places and spaces they're supposed to be in. Experts in this matter say it is known as classified spillage. And in most cases, there are simple mistakes that are not typically charged as crimes. CNN's Katie Bo-Lillis has been looking into this, and she joins us now.
Did you hear that? Sometimes it's just spillage. People just have documents around. You know, they just sometimes it happens. It's called spillage. There's experts about this, and it happens all the time. And those people, they don't get charged with crimes. Spillage, man. And it's funny that when they're talking about this in context of Joe Biden, why are they using a Trump document image? So are you saying that Trump should, like, is this spillage? This looks like spillage to me. I mean, the FBI spilled the documents all over the floor, literally. So they are, I guess this is okay. Spillage of classified info is common. Washington's little secret. And they are talking about, they put Trump's photo up there. So I guess this is not a big deal then? It's not that big of a deal that Trump did it? What? Where's Joe Biden's photo, by the way? Why didn't they take a photo of his documents on the garage next to Hunter's crack pipes and put that here for us? They have to use this document, this photo, because it makes Trump look bad. That's why they put it up there. But they're actually putting it in the context of a chyron down here at the bottom that it's actually very useful to Trump. The spillage is common. It's all over the place.
Spaces there's. All right, this morning we got some new CNN reporting about how just common it could be for classified documents to be outside of the protected places and spaces they're supposed to be in. Experts in this matter say it is known as classified spillage. And in most cases, there are simple mistakes that are not typically charged as crimes. CNN's Katie Bo-Lillis has been looking into this, and she joins us now. All right, Katie, this has been a big question, of course, not just in light of what happened with Trump's documents, but also now with Biden. You know, is it an accepted thing? How common is this? What has your reporting found?
Yeah, Caitlin, this kind of classified spillage happens almost literally every day. And most of the time, it's completely accidental. An employee accidentally takes home a classified document in a briefcase. In one example that we were told, the employee found a classified document that had been accidentally attached to an unclassified travel itinerary. He slept with it under his pillow for a night, returned it the next day, and that was that. Most of these cases are dealt with administratively, internally, with a simple conversation with the security officer at the agency.
That's it. Just a simple phone call, man. That's what Biden's lawyers were trying to do. Oh, man, you're not going to believe this. Joe Biden took that thing home in his briefcase that one time again. Oh, that's it? Well, we know what to do with that. No problem at all. That's called a cover-up. And CNN is providing the cover for the cover-up. They are explaining, it's just a common thing, not even a big deal. You know, it's like sometimes you forget where you put the receipt, you know, and sometimes you got to track it down. That's all that happens. These librarians sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed with all the confidential documents that are flying all over the place.
In question. Now, of course, in more severe cases, there can be penalties such as losing your security clearance or even
like
being
raiding
fired.
your house.
But part of the reason this
Raiding
is
your
so
house.
common, Caitlin, is simply the law of large numbers. There are over 4 million security clearance holders floating around out there, and some national security officials will also acknowledge that the U.S. government has a pretty big problem with overclassification. There are just millions and millions and millions of pieces of classified information, not all of which are exquisite.
Yeah, so spillage or overclassification, both things that are very relevant now that Joe Biden's being the person investigated. But none of that was really appropriate anywhere else when it was Donald Trump. Not that conversation at all. How much overclassification conversation do we get from these people? Do you think that every one of those documents in Trump's residence was needing to be classified? Okay, we've made jokes about all this the whole time. Library books, they're letters from Kim Jong-un and stuff. It's not just that they are overclassifying things and that they have spillage. They're also incompetent, my friends. They're also the federal government. They're not good at almost anything. So why would you expect them to keep track of these documents? And is there anything that the Chinese don't already have?
I've heard that from so many officials, Democrats and Republicans talking about that, and the idea of just basically everything being classified. Okay, but you talk about this one person who accidentally took something home. They slept with it under their pillow to basically guard it and make sure it was okay.
Arrest that man.
When it comes to the president,
Raid his
and now
house.
it's 2 presidents being looked into this,
Raid it.
intent, I imagine, plays a massive role in how these things are handled.
That's not what you said when Trump was involved. That's not what you said at all. Because you were all trying to prove intent. Okay, a lot of the lefty lawyers out there are still playing this game. Oh, Trump posted a Truth Social tweet. They say this all over the place. Trump posted a Truth Social tweet, and he said something about the documents, and that means he knew they were there. Therefore, that's intent. Right? So they're trying to prove intent and then disprove intent, and then the Republicans are saying, no, that disproves intent, and then they say the opposite of that. They say, well, he doesn't need intent. Now you just need simple possession of the documents. And so they pick the arguments that they want based upon the person who's being investigated.
Yeah, the question is, when does it go from something that's handled administratively to something that the agency refers to the Justice Department for investigation and possible prosecution? And the answer is there's no hard and fast rule. It really depends on the case itself, the facts and the circumstances. What we have seen in some of these more high-profile cases of prosecution is that intent to mishandle the information is really the key factor here. Did you intend to hoard it, sell it, leak it?
Yeah, Biden didn't do any of those things. He's just a confused gentleman, and he doesn't know much about anything. So the problem with him is that it was just an accident, and it's spillage, and it's probably just simple overclassification anyways, and so nobody needs to worry about it. But we're going to talk about the Secret Service because evidently, according to Fox News, they're telling us that the Secret Service may be wanting now to name names. And we're going to learn more about what those names might involve right after we talk about our friends over at Goldco. Because as you know, things are scary out there. If you have an IRA or a 401k, it's a mess. Biden administration recently has printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. The national debt hit a record over $30 trillion. Inflation's the highest we've seen since 1982. It's only a matter of time until the house of cards comes crashing down. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends at Goldco. See how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. Go to robertlikesgold.com. They will give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualifying account at robertlikesgold.com. A+ rated business with the Better Business Bureau. And I do like gold. And I hope you do too. Over at robertlikesgold.com. All right, and so let's continue, my friends, because we have a little bit more to get to. The Secret Service is now saying, we're ready to get involved. We'll jump into this and help out if you need it. Published January 19th from Fox News, they write that the Biden classified document investigation now brings the Secret Service in. and that they are ready to provide Delaware visitors' records. They're prepared to offer the names of individuals who visited the Biden Wilmington residence if requested by Congress, Fox News has learned. And guess who's in charge of Congress now? The Republicans have the House. Retention of the names of those that were vetted by the Secret Service depends on a variety of factors, including proximity to the president and the nature of the background check. They write the Secret Service does not maintain visitor logs at the private residences. While the Secret Service does generate law enforcement and criminal justice information for individuals who might come into contact, we're not able to comment further as this speaks to the means and methods of our operations. However, a source familiar with the situation told Fox News that the Secret Service is prepared to provide available background information on vetted guests to Biden's residence if Congress says so. Here's a picture of the Secret Service securing the president when he's golfing, evidently. Biden ignored reporters on Thursday. Somebody said, "Will you commit to speak to the special counsel?" One reporter said. But Biden did not acknowledge any questions. He just smiled and walked out of the room. So will the Secret Service be involved? Don't know. Congress is in charge. And if Congress demands answers, maybe the Secret Service will give them to them. One person who is in Congress, who's leading a lot of the oversight, is Representative James Comer. And he was on explaining how the Chinese pumped millions of dollars over into the Penn Biden Center for years.
New Penn Biden Center, Congressman? It's of the utmost importance. I mean, people are just now seeing what we've known for several months is that the Biden Center for Diplomacy was funded almost exclusively through anonymous Chinese donations. And obviously the Chinese want to get a return on their investment.
Yeah.
So they're not just donating money to the Biden Center for Diplomacy, to Hunter's shady business dealings, and now we believe to Hunter's artwork that's going to anonymous buyers in China. They're not just doing this for charity. They're doing this because they want to get a return on their investment. That poses a national security risk. This is something that every American should be concerned about, and that's why we're investigating the Biden family for their influence peddling.
Your committee has evidence that might lead you to believe that anonymous Chinese foreign nationals were buying anonymously Hunter's artwork?
Well, we know that the artwork went anonymously. We know that. We know that the owner of the art gallery in New York City has bragged about becoming the new link between the United States art world and China. So we know that the White House has told the art dealer to not communicate with the Oversight Committee on anything. Don't even, if they call, hang up. So, you know, you can put the pieces together, but we're obviously going to bring these people in and we're going to interview them, depose them, whatever we have to do under oath. And we'll try to get some answers. We're going to look at all the financial records. We're going to see if, in fact, Hunter Biden was funneling money down to his father. That's going to be very concerning because Hunter's primary source of income, well, I say primary, probably only source of income, were from influence peddling schemes with our adversaries around the world.
Daddy's deals. And Comer says they are coming in hot. Subpoenas, depositions, whatever it takes. We're asking questions of everybody, hoping that they are answering. So we'll see if they adhere to that. We also have another clip from Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, also in the House of Representatives. And she was on responding to some of the latest on the document saga from the Biden administration. Let's listen to her.
No, not at all. And you can see there's a major difference in the leadership with Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House and Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats removed me from committees from things they didn't like on my Facebook years before I became a member of Congress. But you can see that Kevin McCarthy isn't being political. He's removing members of Congress that need to be removed. It's an embarrassment that Eric Swalwell had a sexual relationship with a CCP spy and then was serving on the Intel committee. It's unbelievable.
Look at these two just enjoying this certificate together. Very, very interesting.
that happened. And then we have Adam Schiff, how he has lied and lied to the American people and abused the American people's taxpayer dollars with his lies with the Russia hoax. He never deserved power on that committee, and he shouldn't have been on the January 6th committee either. So Kevin McCarthy, as Speaker of the House, is doing the right thing and removing these Democrat members that deserve to be removed. Ilhan Omar is another example. She's anti-Semitic and she should not be on foreign affairs. These aren't political things. These are the right things to do.
Let me ask you, really, what were hyperbole of furlough and then get paid?
Out that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, all of who have served, if you add up the years they've been in Congress or in power in Washington, we're looking at 150 years of four people's combined time in Washington. So they know what they're doing when they kick the can down the road.
Yeah, they
do.
They're good.
The debt ceiling issue to the Republican majority, which we started here in January.
They are good. They're very smart about this. Like, why did this debt ceiling thing literally land on the Republicans in January? Obviously, right? Now, they sort of had a suspicion the Republicans were going to win. They kicked it down the road, so it'd be a new Congress. Boom, the Republicans have to negotiate or do something about it.
It's an important issue for our conference to come together on because, as you said, the government will keep on running. Yes, people's Social Security checks will keep coming. Military will keep getting paid. Important things will keep happening and keep getting paid. But we have to do a good job as a Republican conference. It's a serious issue. And the spending in Washington that's happened for decades now with both parties is the reason why we're in this terrible place. And Republicans are committed to work on the budget. We want to get it under control. We want it to be balanced, and we want to reduce the national debt. But the debt ceiling is going to be a point of contention in our conference, but it's going to have to be one that we come together on. We aren't going to send something to the Senate to make it to Joe Biden's desk to be signed, and we want to make sure that we have things in there that we have to have. I, for one, will not sign a clean bill raising the debt limit.
All right, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. So we've got some individuals in Congress making some pretty serious changes. One of them is demanding the removal of Ilhan Omar, and she had a response to this. She was asked about this when she was on MSNBC. Are they removing you?
Is that correct? You are currently not. You do not currently have a committee assignment.
So no committee assignments have been divvied out on the Democratic side and on the majority of the Republican side as well.
What is your response to
the steering committee has not actually done that. What I do want the public to understand is that since I've gotten sworn in 2019, my first term, McCarthy has been promising to his donors and the Republican base that I should not sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
And looks like that's probably going to happen. So that is what we'll await to see. New assignments have come out, and we'll see what the Republicans do. Of course, we'll continue to follow. And thank you for liking this video wherever it is you're watching it and subscribing, because we look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends. And as we wrap up today, just a couple quick clips from the FBI director. Christopher Wray showed up at the World Economic Forum and had some interesting clips. I'll share a couple of those here today. He talked about technology, artificial intelligence in China, talked about collaborating with big tech, and he said very hilariously that the good guys follow the law, because he's a good guy, and that's what the FBI is filled with, a bunch of good guys, and they all follow the law. Here's Christopher Wray at the World Economic Forum telling us about technology, the upside, and some of the downside, some of the things that can be scary about technology.
And I think the sophistication of the private sector is improving, and particularly important, the level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, especially the FBI, has, I think, made significant strides. Pretty much every technology we could talk about today, we see both great opportunity but great dangers in the wrong hands.
A lot of opportunity to email the Twitter executives and tell them to get rid of dangerous misinfo or disinformation, as we saw in the Twitter files. Elvis Chan, delete this, delete that. He's the person who's fielding and sending those requests over to Twitter. But they also talk about AI in China. FBI Director Wray, a little bit concerned that the Chinese have a much more sophisticated artificial intelligence system than we do.
When it comes to AI, I am, and we are deeply concerned, for example, about the Chinese government's AI program, which doesn't share the values, I think, reflected up here on this panel or in this room. The Chinese government has a bigger hacking program than any other nation in the world, and their AI program is not constrained by the rule of law, is built on top of the massive troves of intellectual property and sensitive data that they've stolen over the years.
Gobbling it up, right? They don't have any IP prohibitions about just taking and stealing everything from the United States. We spend billions of dollars generating software and technology that's just code, and they just copy it. They just take the whole thing and copy it over there. And then they use a lot of the same technologies that we've helped them develop against us, right? It's very convenient. One of those applications is called TikTok. FBI knows what a danger it is. Congress knows what a danger it is. Everybody knows how many teenagers and individuals have this installed on their phones. It's basically jacking them into the CCP, into their cortex, and nobody's done anything about it, right? So they sit around and they talk about their concerns, but then they just let these weaponized apps roam free around America.
And will be used, unless checked, to advance that same hacking program, to advance that same intellectual property theft, to advance the repression that occurs not just back home in mainland China, but increasingly is a product that they export around the world. And so that's something we're deeply concerned about, and I think everyone here should be deeply concerned.
Everybody should be concerned about that because there are competing structures of totalitarian top-down control. The Chinese have their version. The World Economic Forum has their version. The United States government has their version. Everybody wants control in one way, shape, or form. They're asking themselves about who has it best, who is first, essentially. So Christopher Wray is communicating with big tech. We've seen that. We've covered a lot of that here on this channel. All sorts of FBI agents involved in policing misinformation and disinformation. They're all very petrified about it. It's one of the biggest threats to the whole country, in fact, when they're not focused on creating their own little fictional white supremacy movements.
On the other hand, I think the sophistication of the private sector is improving, and particularly important, the level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, especially the FBI, has, I think, made significant strides. We are focused, looking at cyber attacks, looking at what's happening in the Ukraine. We did see, as the conflict erupted, an increased effort by the Russian intelligence services, which have been conducting malicious cyber activity against U.S. infrastructure for years.
Oh, the Russians.
But we're increasingly concerned that the surveillance activity, the scanning, the research, all the preparatory activity that could be one thing, could be an indication of something more serious. And so the name of the game in terms of cyber defense from our perspective is to try to
eliminate bad election memes?
To use a terrorism analogy, further left of boom. And that's why, for example, we conducted a significant technical operation against a GRU botnet in the early months of the conflict because we didn't want to wait around to find out what they were up to and what.
This sounds like a cyber war, right? I mean, like they launched a cyber attack against a botnet. So I think we're in officially a cyber war. Is that what he's saying?
Against the Russians? Botnet in the early months of the conflict because we didn't want to wait around to find out what they were up to and what their ultimate intentions were. When you talk about autonomous vehicles, it's obviously something that we're excited about, just like everybody. But there are harms that we have to guard against that are more than just the obvious. One of them is the danger that there could be ways to confuse or distort the algorithms to cause physical harm. So I'm thinking about a story I heard not that long ago about the researchers who were able to trick a self-driving car's algorithm by essentially putting a piece of black tape over a stop sign and cause the car to accelerate by 50 miles an hour or something. It's a simple example, but it shows kind of some of the harms we have to guard against. And then a different kind of harm that we're concerned about is the enormous amount of data that autonomous vehicles, for example, aggregate. And anytime you aggregate lots and lots of sensitive data, it makes a very tempting target. So thinking of electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles as an attack surface of their own, not just in terms of destructive ability, but in terms of the data that it aggregates and the harms that could come from that is something that is very much on our mind.
Yeah. All right. Everybody is falling to sleep in the chat. I can see that. Susanna says, from our locals community, says that his tone is very different. And it is. It's funny. He's in a room of friends. He's in a room of other sophisticated people. He's not in front of Congress. And his attitude changes a lot. He's a lot more, sort of a calm and even keeled. When he's in front of Congress, he sort of is annoyed that he's even there in the first place. Why am I here? I have vacations to go on. Now, the final clip, the best one, is when he's talking about the good guys following the law. Here is FBI Director Christopher Wray telling us that the good guys follow the law, even though his very own FBI was crapping all over the First Amendment for years.
I think I would make two important points. And one is, you'll notice, and I think quite rightly, he repeatedly referred to the good guys working together. And that is the critical premise for that to happen, because in a world, whether you want to call it cat and mouse or anything else, we're in a world where all these technologies are available to both the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys are constrained by the rule of law and international norms. Bad guys aren't, which you could argue in a sense gives them a competitive advantage. The competitive advantage the good guys have is that for all the reasons Matthew said, when we're all working together, then they're no match. Yes. Because the bad guys' relationships with each other are purely transactional, and they'll turn on each other in a heartbeat if it suits them. But because they're not constrained by the rule of law, because they're not constrained by international norms.
Bro, we have your emails from Elvis Chan to Yoel Roth from Twitter telling people to censor Americans engaging in free speech during an election. Is that international norms? Is that what other countries do? They have their biggest federal law enforcement agency silencing their own citizens for election jokes? Follow the rule of law. Give me a break, dude. It's in your emails, time-stamped.
Because they're not constrained by the rule of law, because they're not constrained by international norms, we have to be mindful of the advantage that gives them and work together in partnership.
Yeah. Okay, that's the FBI. That's probably what they believe over there. Meanwhile, they have a whole team of people colluding with big tech companies to silence and censor misinformation everywhere they turn. We'll continue to cover it. Thank you for liking this video wherever it is you're watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends. Well, we covered a lot of ground here today. That's it for the show. We had the White House staying silent. We had Trump responding to Biden. We had the worst week ever and the biggest political backfire over for Biden and the White House. Hunter Biden riding around in daddy's Corvette. But now it's time to hear from you and to see what you have to say about all of this and more. I saw some very generous super chats come in from our friend Zulu and others. And so let's make sure we attend to some of these before we wrap it up on the day. The first one in the house came in from our friend Just Cause, mod extraordinaire, says, cover Baldwin's projectile dysfunction update. Yes. Is there anything good to cover on that? Yeah, Alec Baldwin's getting charged with involuntary manslaughter. Are the charging documents filed yet? Just, we'll cover that when we get the charging documents. Hey, thanks, Maddie Adams. Maddie always says thank you on YouTube. Thank you, Maddie. I say thank you to hosts, too, when I'm done listening to them. I say thank you. I do. I say that all the time. Out loud when I'm done. But when I'm done with a lecture or an audio book or whatever, I say thank you. So thank you for saying that, Maddie. It's very nice of you. STFU, Just Cause is in the house. We have Chris says, great, good job. Appreciate you keeping us informed. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for being here and for the support on the show. Zulu is here. Says, as a lawyer, do you think Biden should plead the fifth 400 times in the pending case, or would that make him look guilty? Also, can he just pardon himself and all his lackeys in advance? I've heard good things about that executive perk. So yes, he can to both of those things. So first of all, I would encourage him to absolutely. So Zulu's comments are always fun because they're like serious, but needly at the same time. So I'll try to answer them seriously and needly. As a lawyer, do you think you should plead the fifth? Yes, 100 times, 400 times is great. It's a good start. And Joe Biden absolutely should use that strategy. He should not talk about anything. Does it make him look guilty? No, he should do it. Also, should he pardon himself and all his lackeys in advance? Yes, he should. And Trump should have done that too. Trump should have pardoned all the J6ers, and he should have pardoned himself and everybody in his purview. And he didn't. And it was a huge mistake, and a lot of people are rotting away in jail because of it. I've heard good things about that executive perk. It's a good one. That's why everybody wants to be president. Yeah, Joe Biden should pardon himself, should pardon everybody. Hunter, James, Jill, he should pardon his whole stinking administration. And I support that because it would show what a gigantic catastrophe our whole federal government is. It's just a joke. Yes, he should pardon himself. Trump should have pardoned himself. Joe Biden should pardon himself. Everybody should pardon himself. Yeah, and Zulu's poking fun because Trump did. He went to that deposition, I think, with Letitia James, right, in New York. And he did. He invoked the fifth like 400 times. And the left was doing cartwheels over it. And the right was saying good. And he came out and he said, I sat through it. And, it's a blood sport, Zulu. I want to see the blood. It's like everybody's in the Coliseum now. That's why I want to see Biden's house get raided. It's only fair. Let's see it, baby. Thank you, Zulu. And Zulu, you sent in another one at another very generous one just to correct the typo, which is very appreciated. Thank you for sending that in. Yeah. Yeah, Paul Mino says, let him fight. Raid equality. Yeah, I'm for equal opportunity raids, man. I want equal raids for everybody. And closet raids, the whole thing. Thank you very much, Zulu. Says, glad to catch you live. Great videos, Robert. Thank you, Sufficient Me. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you made it by live, too. Yeah, it's fun when it's here live. Rated lives matter. That came in from Vientikiss. Yeah, rate everybody, man. Rate all of them. Zulu says, what are the applicable library book statutes? Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. Are those codified in the federal law? I don't know. When I was talking about them, Zulu, I made them up when I was talking about all the library book saga with Trump. And what was the woman's name? Deborah Stidel Wall. Remember her? She's the head librarian. You'd have to talk to her about it. And she was the one who did not like that Trump clip. Trump said, oh, yeah, a lot of books in there. Remember her? Remember Deborah Stidel Wall? Remember that? I probably have a clip of that. Let me see if I can find it. Deborah Stidel Wall was an actual clip of Trump, but I can't figure her name out. Actually, here's a short that we did on this. Look, here's a short of Deborah Stidel Wall that we did a long time ago. Let me unmute this. Actually, here, I'm going to play this over here. This is the head archivist of the country. Over from Just the News. This came from a woman named Deborah, I believe is her name. And this is Donald Trump, who's actually sort of welcoming her or commending her on the anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment in the White House Blue Room. You're going to see Deborah's this woman back over here. Trump's there. There's Melania. They're saying, hey, nice job, Miss National Archives. I mean, gosh, you must have a lot of books to manage over there.
Deborah Stidel Wall, Deputy Archivist of the United States. That sounds like a very big job.
Oh,
that's a lot of archives.
A lot of archives. A lot of archives.
How many buildings does that take up, right? Great job. I hear you do a great job. Thank you very much.
She didn't like that comment at all.
She did not like it.
At all, which is why she's like, yeah, you want to indict him? Yeah, whatever records you need, I'm going to go get them for you. Oh, overdue library books. So she's the person. She's the one. You got to go, Zulu, you got to get your records from Deborah Stidel Wall. I don't know what the statutory law is, but she's in charge. She started all of this. And she's the person who we got to know what she was demanding from Joe Biden, when and where and how. Yeah, Gunface is here. Says, remember when China told Blinken at the beginning of his administration that we were in a position to give anyone orders? Yeah, I do remember that. That was hilarious, actually. It was embarrassing as an American, but it was hilarious. Because Blinken, I remember that exchange, right? Blinken said something like, we condemn your treatment of the Uyghurs. And they said, listen, you racist BLM murderers, look what you people did to George Floyd. How dare you lecture us? And the White House was like, oh, I guess that's true. We are a bunch of racists. And they got egg on their face on that one. Good to see you, Gunface. Chris Wolney says, your commentary, Rob, hilarious, but true. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you enjoy it, Chris. I'm glad that you're here and supporting us and enjoying it. STFU says, someone should ask KJP if she knows Ron Ziegler. I don't know if I know who that is. STFU. So would she know that? Should she know who that is? You're not talking about Garrett, are you? Garrett Ziegler is the guy who did the Hunter Biden investigation for Marco Polo USA. That's what I'd be curious. V says, oh, former White House press secretary? I'm not sure who that is. Yeah, I don't know. But those were the great comments that came in from our friends on YouTube. Thank you to everybody who sent those in. Very generous of you. I always appreciate that. And we also have our friends on Twitter that we're going to say hello to before we wrap it up on the day, and head over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our after party. Oh my goodness. We are at a whopper 11 viewers, baby. We're growing. This thing is going to hit the moon. Get ready for it. Invest in Twitter stock because it's about to get wild over here. Let's do a quick comment chat and see a comment screen. Make sure things are looking nice and good. There's a Hunter Biden picture here. So I got to just check some of these things, before we start scrolling like a maniac. But come over and follow us at Rob Govea, ESQ on Twitter. And yeah, Paul Mino is sharing a meme saying the knives out are for, there are knives out for certain individuals. Also said this one, snowblower. Oh yes, this is leaf blower guy. We had leaf blower guy who was making his way around this place here today, and he's out there. We love leaf blower guy. V says, isn't it funny how all the people who hate Trump the most are the most adamant about having his legacy injected into their bodies? Yeah, there's a big debate. Hey, I had a question about this one. Here, let me throw this in the chat. I wanted to make a poll about this. This says engage with your audience. All right, I'll try to do that. How do I do this? Oh, Rumble Ranches came in. Okay, I can't do that right now. We'll do a poll later. Rumble Ranches came in over here from Detum. Says, why does Bannon keep mentioning Dana Remus's name? I don't know that name. Somebody else mentioned that too. They said that she might have been the second attorney who showed up. I think that name is being thrown around as the second attorney who showed up in the timeline. So let me just go to that real fast so I can show you. In the Biden timeline, we're looking for the second person who appeared there on November 4th. This person up here. Could this be? Our question is, Dana. Don't know. Good question on that. The poll that I was going to create in the chat was about, because V brought up the comment about the jabs, right? Trump is really standing behind the jabs. So my question would be, which one wins? A pro-jab Trump in the primary. Okay, who wins the primary? Pro-Trump jab primary versus anti-jab DeSantis. Pro-Trump jab versus anti-jab DeSantis in the primaries. Does that change the game at all? I don't know. Vienticus is here, says the Chinese word for compromised is in a Google search. And we got Paul Mino sharing, our friend, rest in peace. Danny McWilliams says, you steal millions for people, it's a white-collar crime. And you go to a white-collar jail of a year or two, hundreds of people's lives distorted. You steal for one person and you're not rich, you do hard time, plus you pay them back. Yeah. Yeah, if you steal $100,000, you go to prison for life. If you steal $100 billion or $1 billion, not so much. Or FTX, you just roam around free. Danny says nothing will be done. Danny says you can't pardon before a conviction. Yeah, I think you can. So like Nixon got a pardon and he wasn't convicted. That's one presidential example, right? From Gerald Ford. Yep. Also an attorney. What's up, CA Human? Sheila Mays is here. Brenda has this Hunter meme, which is actually something I can share. It says, so dad is pissed. I was supposed to clean the garage. He's out there talking with somebody. Hey, my dad's the vice president. He has an awesome set of confidential documents. Can't believe Hunter was not wearing a seatbelt. That's a good point, Adam. Very unsafe. And, those are not even electric cars. You forgot about this poll, Rob. This one came in from Mike. We'll just say the last name later. Political polls says Trump's at 51, DeSantis is at 30% in the Republican primary. So my question again is, if Trump is pro-jab, DeSantis is anti-jab, does that change those numbers? Yeah, and Preeta saying, is he still capable? Is our current president still functional and capable in the office? No. Probably why they're trying to boot him out of there. But all right, my friends, I think that is about it for us on the day. And so thank you to everybody who sent in the very nice super chats. Deet M over on Rumble. And also shout out to our Rumble friends. I see Anything's over there, Dog Diggers, TJ MacD's. We've got Little Galaxies in the house, Isle Paint. Rob, how did Kamala Harris become natural born? Well, I think they're saying that she was just born. Where was she physically born? I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Why do they say somebody brought that up in our locals chat? I think her parents are, I don't know. I don't remember the details on that. Good question though. We also had a YouTube tip. I'm sorry, a locals tip that came in, and for some reason it's being difficult to read, but it came in from our friend Don't Be Hatin'. Here it is. Don't Be Hatin' is saying that there's a funeral for Diamond this weekend. Thank you, Don't Be Hatin'. Shared this from Trump. Says, please join President Trump's Silk family and friends as we celebrate the incredible life of Diamond. That's going to be this Saturday, January 24th, 4 p.m., Crown Theater in North Carolina. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we'll definitely spread that around. But all right, my friends, that is it for us on the day. We are going to jump over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our usual after party. We'll hang out there for a little bit and continue up with some comments and some after party fun. But before we wrap up, I want to remind you about the web address where you can go if you want to join us at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Throw that in your web address. It's free. I'm not currently turning it over to supporter mode only. So come hang out with us if you'd like to. Also, don't forget to support our sponsors by going over to 4patriots.com and get your survival gear, get your survival food. You can get all sorts of cool stuff there. 4patriots.com. Use code Robert. Save 10% off anything your first order. Also, our friends over at Goldco. You can go right to robertlikesgold.com. You can request a free kit. There's just a website there. Put in your information. They'll send you something. See if it's a good fit. If it sounds like it's good for you, work with them. We have a new sponsor that'll be starting next week. I'm excited to share that with you. And of course, our law firm, the R&R Law Group, where we help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope. And you can find us online at rrlawaz.com. And I appreciate you sticking around through some of those final promo reads and for supporting the show. I know there's a lot of debate about that right now. It's very appreciated that you're here with us and that you support the show by allowing us to share these great sponsors with you. I'm grateful for it. I am also very grateful for the mods of the show. Vientikis Prime. We miss our friend Lean. I'm not sure where she's at. We also have K Bean, Just Cause, Playin' Hooky, Ronnie Cole. Zulu was in the house tonight. Thank you very much for modding the fort down for us and for keeping things nice and orderly in the chat. And that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com to continue on over there, and I hope you join us. But if not, I do hope to see you right back here tomorrow. It's going to be a beautiful Friday. We're going to see what the news has in store for us, and I hope to see you here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. Locals, I'll see you in 30 seconds. Everybody else, sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.